Alaska Magazine Television is made possible by Holland America, cruising Alaska's picturesque waters for more than 53 years. The McKinley Explorer, providing rail service to Mount McKinley from Anchorage and Fairbanks on fully restored 50s-era dome rail cars. And Westmark Hotels, northern hospitality in 14 locations. And by Holland America Tours, the oldest, newest name in escorted touring throughout the great land we call Alaska.
Hi, I'm Rick Batance from the Halibut Cove Lodge in Halibut Cove, Alaska. Welcome to Alaska Magazine Television.
Alaska, the great man.
Alaska. Few places on the planet inspire the imagination or stimulate the spirit quite the same. Come explore life on the last frontier with the people who call this great place home. Welcome to Alaska Magazine Television. Ahead, Halibut Cove oyster farming, Gold Rush working girls, a quiet place in the Brooks Range, and Prince William Sound a decade later.
No roads run through this lush green country. Glaciers crawl down the mountains here. Water hugs the winding coastline. Bays and coves abound. 250 miles south of Anchorage, Halibut Cove adjoins Kachemak Bay. Fewer than 100 people live here. Lots of otters and eagles, fish, millions of oysters, and a handful of oyster farmers.
This is a lot different than dirt farming. A dirt farmer, he can get his pickup truck and drive out in the field and take a look, and he can tell what if it needs to be irrigated or if it needs to fertilize.
In Kevin Seidlinger's field, the crops are always under the water, right where they should be. Seidlinger is one of the 5 oyster farmers in Halibut Cove.
We have a good area here for growing. We have a good combination of environmental conditions. We have these glaciers, and as they're melting and all the sediments coming down in the form of silica, there are organisms that use silica to form themselves, which the oysters in turn eat. And we also have an area. The Kachemak Bay is considered one of the most significant estuaries in Alaska, and it's very, very nutrient rich.
Oysters have been farmed on and off in Alaska since 1900. After a long slump beginning in the 50s, the market was revived in the 90s by a growing demand for high-quality half-shell oysters.
Oysters that are grown in cold waters are really desirable, cold water oyster. And, you know, besides, Alaska has a reputation for clean waters, and it has clean. Our waters are very clean. We don't have the industry that you have upstream from the ocean, and most of our industries are clean. We don't have a lot of manufacturing.
Oysters are not indigenous here, so farmers imported their oyster seed for years. But concerns about the import quality led the University of Alaska to build an experimental oyster nursery in Halibut Cove. The research project's success became a for-profit venture run by the co-op. The nursery imports 3-millimeter seed, about 1 million at a time. They grow in these sheltered bins until they're large enough to move to the farm. Seawater, propelled by a paddle wheel, is flushed through the system, washing and feeding the growing seed.
We try to maintain about 2 million oysters in here at a time, and I decide when it's time to have a sale. We try to get them up at about a size of 15 to 20 millimeter to go out on the farm, and I can show you some here. These here are ready to go. And this would be what we would putting in the nets as we go out on the farm. Oh, in my hand I have probably about 100 oysters. In industry standard, we're considered advanced because we have this. And It's quite an interesting thing. It's Fred Flintstone technology, but it really works.
Out on the farm, the farmers may not have to feed their crop, but they are continually checking their 5-tier nets, pulling up 80 pounds of rope, net and oysters out of the water over and over again. They divide the oysters up by size, redistribute them through the nets, and clean debris out of the nets to help the crop grow uniformly.
The markets are so strong here in Alaska and right now, and we have majority of our oysters are spoken for in Alaska. We do have a couple markets outside Elliott's in Seattle and Sampson's Oyster House in Philadelphia. And they were kind of like some of the original customers.
In August, at the peak of harvest season, they deliver live oysters to buyers twice a week. It helps farmers that their oysters are not indigenous to Alaska. In the summer, where native oysters are spawning, Halibut Cove oysters are ready for harvest.
This oyster here is about 2 1/4 ounces, minus the mussels and the mud. And if we get this ready for market, what we do is we take all these mussels off, scrape these barnacles off, and clean it all up. And we try to you have to be very careful. It's a lot of handwork. We don't want to damage this fragile edge, because what you can do is chip it and open it up, and the liquid will drain out.
Right.
And that'll dry the oyster out. I'll take and I twist and I apply pressure down the hinge, and then as it slides in, we'll just pry it open and pry it up like so. And you can look in there and you can see that oyster meat. And we'll just take and carefully clip that mussel and pop the top of the shell off. We scrape that loose. And now it's ready to eat.
Kevin Seidlinger is looking ahead, but he's not rushing the future.
I want to raise the half-shell oyster. I want to stick with one thing and try to do it better than anybody else.
Right.
At the moment, he's experimenting with perfection.
That is really a beautiful oyster there. Look at that color and the deep, dark color. And oysters are very interesting. They're not like oranges or apples. They're all very distinct and different in shape. And now to me, that's a very beautiful oyster. These oysters, yeah. Now that's a good oyster.
Summer 1897. Gold was discovered in the Klondike. The news was whispered from ear to ear and shouted from the rooftops. Mayors and firemen, lawyers and streetcar drivers quit their sensible jobs in settled towns, put a grub stake together, and headed north. That year and the next, upwards of 100,000 made their way to the gold fields. It was a man's world. Turn-of-the-century Dawson and the Yukon Territory, then the biggest city between Seattle and Oblivion, had just 800 women in it, and 10,000 men. What were these women doing there? Just like the men, the bold ones, the rash ones, the desperate and the daring, they headed north for fortune and adventure. At the end of the Victorian era, a woman's life was restricted by expectations and conventions, clothing, even the law. Gold mining wasn't anything like home, but the hard labor of prospecting was grim and grueling, demanding brute strength. For many, the choice was between women's work and the fast life. Not mining for gold, but mining the miners. As a mining camp jingle put it, Lottie went to the diggings. With Lottie we must be just. If she didn't shovel tailings, where did Lottie get her dust? It took dust to survive. At least $6 a day. A laundry worker made $5 with room and board, but a housekeeper earned only $12 a week. Given the odds, the fast life looked pretty good. A dance-hall girl could earn $40 in a week, plus 25% of every drink she hustled. And a prostitute could turn $3 tricks easy. Working girls with savvy did much better.
For a very hurried entertainment, usually 15 minutes, the ladies charged 4 ounces of gold, $64. But they weighed the dust on their own scales, which were crooked, and helped themselves to the miner's poke. The result was that they usually finished up with at least 8 ounces. C.E. Trelawney Ansell.
Quasi-legal red light districts thrived, and miners were generally grateful for the company, some even anxious for marriage, which wasn't always the best deal. Women traded away independence for economic protection, betting everything on one man who might go broke, run off, or turn mean. As sporting women, they were in business for themselves, and business could be lucrative. The Klondike and Alaska's gold fields were alive with possibility, energy, and new freedoms. Dawson's legendary dance hall girl was Klondike Kate Rockwell. She had natural red hair, violet eyes, long black lashes, and genuine sex appeal. Not to mention talent. Kate was paid $200 a week at the Palace Theater to perform her famous Flame Dance, in which she moved gracefully to music, keeping 200 yards of chiffon airborne. Kate brought in $500 a night just on dances and drinks and amassed a fortune. The stepdaughter of a judge, educated in Catholic girls' schools, Klondike Kate fell for a Greek waiter named Alexander Pantages, supported him in hard times, and backed his first dance hall. It was a good investment. Pantages became a millionaire. Nome. Alaska's gold strike was sudden and one of the richest ever. There was gold in the riverbeds, but also on the beaches. Over $3 million worth was taken out in just 2 years, $80 million in 2 decades. This latecomers gold rush lured 30,000 stampeders. And Nome was a crooked camp. Claim jumpers were everywhere. Saloon keepers ran the city council, and law enforcement thrived on graft. Good time girls were fined regularly. The chief of police and the judges each took a cut before turning the balance over to the city treasury. Presbyterian preacher S. Hall Young, who'd been through the worst of the Dawson rush and considered himself unflappable, conceded that Nome was rough.
Saloons and gambling houses ran wide open for a while. Considerable violence and lawlessness occurred. We had 7 funerals in 10 days, all violent deaths, 4 murders, and 3 suicides.
In 1900, the grand jury ordered immoral women and the unemployed out of Nome. Those who remained were abruptly relocated to a fenced-in district and taxed $11 a head. Carrie McLean, then a child who lived outside Nome's Tenderloin, later wrote,
"One day my father told us to take a gunny sack and pick up wood chips from new construction on Front Street for kindling. There was a high wooden fence separating the red light district from the residential section, with openings here and there. Not knowing what red light meant, nor the significance of the fence, we walked through one of the openings and came to a row of little green houses. Over each door was the name of the occupant, Lulu, Violet, or Rose, and in each window sat one of the girls with her hair done in Floridora style, face rouged, and looking very beautiful to us youngsters. That evening we asked our father who were those beautiful women in the little green houses. I can still see the smile on his face, but we were not asked again to gather wood chips."
Fairbanks, where annual gold revenues exceeded $9 million by 1906, also battled lawlessness and violence. A workable solution was called the Fairbanks Line, where prostitutes plied their trade, provided a social life for the miners, and even organized a library of sorts. By the time World War I and the mechanization of placer mining brought an end to the gold rush, many of the good time girls had blended into Fairbanks society, including Ray Alderman, who married her longtime lover, Mayor Tom Markham, just in time to greet President Warren G. Harding as Fairbanks' First Lady. And so the gold rush and the good time girls came and went in the Klondike and in Alaska. Fortunes were made and lost and made again, or never made at all. History tells us that dance hall girls, prostitutes, women miners, and women entrepreneurs of all sorts helped to civilize the North. Not all sterling characters, no more than the men were, but true pioneers in every sense of the word.
We call where we live an Eskimo word, loosely translated as time and place of joy in the present moment. It is Koviashevik.
Koviashevik is a small cluster of buildings on the edge of the Brooks Range, the last great wilderness in North America. No roads lead to Koviashevik. It's a 2-day hike over rugged terrain from the Dalton Highway, or a 40-minute float plane ride from Bettles. Out here, life takes on a different rhythm and a different focus. Fishing isn't sport for Sam Wright and his wife Donna Lee, it's survival.
Bring a nice size trout. I think that would be really great. Just big enough for 4, okay? How's that sound?
No bigger?
No, 4.
Every afternoon involves a trip out onto Big Lake and a search for pike and trout.
I think for me, anyway, it's a chance to know what my ancestry and, well, all of us as human beings, for a million years, this is the way we lived. We were hunters and food gatherers. And only recently, in terms of the length of human life, have we built the artificial world that most of us live in. And I don't knock it, but it gets too much sometimes.
This afternoon, Sam catches 2 good-sized pike. At Koviashevik, Sam and Donna are directly connected to what they eat. In the summer, it's fish. In winter, moose and caribou. This is where perishables are kept, in a barrel dug deep into permafrost. It's as cold as any electric refrigerator.
And this is the way we keep things in the summertime when we can't keep them outside. So let's see, need some cheese here.
There are no quick trips to the grocery store. A summer's food has to be carefully planned.
Well, when we come up, we bring whatever will fit in the airplane, and that's a limited amount of weight up with us. And so what we have is what we have.
Sam first came to Big Lake in 1968 to explore and work some mining claims. Big Lake was already rich in history, some of it reflected in a small burial site.
Old John Rooney was a miner who panned gold here. His friends came over here and found him and his last leg and buried him. And he died in June 1941.
Sam says he'll be buried here someday as well. He wrote a book about his experiences at the lake. In it, he details the natural world that surrounds him and how it's changed his life.
Summer is great billowing clouds above mountains with rainstorms, sleet, hail, lightning. And fires. Smoke drifts up the valleys. Clouds of mosquitoes hum above the muskegs, and fireweed is crimson in the foothills. In midsummer, the sun never sets below the horizon.
Sam is especially fascinated by Arctic terns. He calls them birds of light because they're always in the sun, migrating from here to the Antarctic on the other side of the world.
And now he was back in the northern sun to mate and hatch 2 downy chicks on the shore of Koviashevik. By the end of the summer, they would be able to follow their parents south into the winter night 11,000 miles away. But they go down there for the summer down there, but they do all of their nesting and hatching up here, so this is home. It's our home, too.
Sam Wright thinks would be a healthier society if more people could find their own version of Koviashevik. And it doesn't need to be in a remote cabin. It can be anywhere.
I need to find that more quiet place that gives me a sense of who I am.
It was the worst oil spill in U.S. history. On March 24, 1989, the oil tanker Exxon Valdez struck Bligh Reef. 11 million gallons of crude oil gushed out of its gaping hull into Prince William Sound. The aftermath was disastrous. 250,000 or more seabirds died, nearly 3,000 sea otters, hundreds of harbor seals and bald eagles, as many as 22 killer whales, and billions of salmon and herring eggs. Opinion is divided about the 4-year cleanup effort. Some say time and wave action were as effective as the efforts of 10,000 people. Oil still lurks on the beaches, and now cleanup efforts are targeted. People have lived around Chenega Bay for over 200 years. Now, as then, they live mostly by subsistence, depending for their livelihood on the intertidal zone of Prince William Sound. On the harbor seal, mussel beds, salmon, herring, the deer, the rich plant life. All these were and are still affected by the spill. For years, Chenega Bay residents appealed for help from the Exxon Valdez Oil Spill Trustees Council. Finally, in 1998, a cleanup effort was organized for their beaches.
Well, to me, it makes me feel real happy that they're actually taking care of going back and doing a lot of extra cleanup to get rid of this other oily waste that they said was probably never here to begin with. That was all clean and all the beaches were clean. I really think that doing this right here really is making a big difference as far as the impact on the sea life and stuff. So.
There are other hot spots, in the sound that you can find this sort of thing too. But the Chenega area seems to have been the hardest hit and still has a lot remaining. So. Primarily it's stuck in between the cracks of these large rocks, which is protecting it from breaking down naturally. And, this is the sort of thing that we're here cleaning up.
Crews use an air knife, a high-pressure air hose, to apply an organic oil cleaner. Called PES 51, it's made from oranges and lemons and smells like oranges. Much like a mechanic's hand cleanser, PES softens and lifts the oil away from the rocks and soil. Cleanup crews follow the air knife, flooding water down the beaches with fire hoses and mopping the flushed oil with absorbent cloth.
I'm pretty impressed with it, actually. I found a lot of oil here in pockets underneath the boulders and then the asphalt layer as well.
A decade since the Exxon Valdez ran aground, Prince William Sound's recovery is still a work in progress. The spilled 11 million gallons of crude oil could have filled 125 Olympic-sized swimming pools. It soiled 1,300 miles of shoreline, and wave action spread at 450 water miles out from Bligh Reef. Of the injured wildlife, only 2 species have been declared fully recovered, and concerns about the health of the food chain will occupy researchers well into the future. The Exxon Valdez Oil Spill Trustee Council, funded by settlement money from Exxon, oversees restoration of the injured ecosystem. Council programs include long-term habitat protection and community-based restoration projects. The Council also funds ongoing research to track the well-being of Prince William Sound species and to increase our understanding of this delicate and complex ecosystem.
It's slowly starting to come back. I would think by the time that my kids have kids, that hopefully by then it'll be back to normal, or at least to half normal anyway, of what it was before the spill, I guess. Yeah, it is really important that we're out here, and like I said, these are our beaches, so we really like to make sure that they're safe and clean, and we have good sea life out here to be able to live off of, because that's what we use as subsistence out here, that's our means of life, so.
Dan Strauss came to Palmer High School in the fall of 1978 as a teacher and football coach. He told his first team that they were the beginning of a tradition that lives on decades later. Dan's love for his family, Palmer, and its history are evidenced in his involvement with the Palmer Historical Society and in the Cream Puff Pioneers, a musical play about the Matanuska colony. Dan both wrote and performed this play in his own natural amphitheater overlooking spectacular Connect Valley.
The seeds they planted in 1935 are now being harvested still, as their children, and now their grandchildren, continue to make the Matanuska Valley the valley of their dreams.
A gentle, almost reverent storyteller, Dan passed away suddenly in April of 2000. The ripples he created on the pond of life in Palmer, Alaska will continue to resonate for countless generations to come. Dan has left an indelible mark on Palmer and its people. He is fondly remembered and sorely missed, but his spirit lives on.
Alaska Magazine Television comes from the pages of Alaska Magazine. Expand your knowledge of Alaska 10 times each year with Alaska Magazine, the companion piece to Alaska Magazine Television. Subscriptions available to public television viewers at 1-800-361-3113. Alaska Magazine Television is made possible by Holland America, cruising Alaska's picturesque waters for more than 53 years. The McKinley Explorer, providing rail service to Mount McKinley from Anchorage and Fairbanks on fully restored 50s-era dome rail cars. And Westmark Hotels, northern hospitality in 14 locations. And by Holland America Tours, the oldest, newest name in escorted touring throughout the great land we call Alaska.
Alaska, the great
Alaska Magazine.
Alaska, the great